university. So I didn't only get in crap at the university, but also at home. Yeah, that was not. So having hobbies is good, and figuring out ways of differentiating yourself, but using your passion as that compass to differentiate yourself. I've been at career fairs and things where people have come in and they've given me their resume, and the next thing you know, they pull out a Windows phone and said, "Oh yeah, I wrote this app on the weekend. I went to some game fest, and my friend here and we wrote this game on a Windows 8 phone." I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It just shows that initiative, shows that passion. Maybe you're contributing to an open source project. Maybe you think Microsoft is evil and doesn't share and all that kind of stuff. So you're saying, well, I'm going to go work on SourceForge and contribute to some open source project that Python or something like that. Great. It just shows your passion. It shows how you're finding ways of extending yourself. The way I think about that is when I was at uni doing my master's degree, most of the assignments, if you did just the assignment, that was worth 75%. You had to figure out an extension to that assignment to get the other remaining 25% marks. So if you go to all of your classes, get great grades, toe the line, but all you do is your classes, it's kind of like that 75%. If you say, what advice for someone who's not yet completed their degree? Think about ways to distinguish yourself, push yourself out, show what you've got. You're smart people to be here in the first place. You're passionate about something, to stick with a program for this long. Find ways of sharing that passion. So, as I sort of allude to, the big evil Microsoft that some people think. My next question. Some people think that Microsoft is a big and clunky company that isn't innovative. What do you think about that? So Microsoft is working very hard in this area. And I've been on the forefront with the Xbox One team and have seen the innovation firsthand, and how they've seen how sometimes the engineering management can get a little clunky, and they've been working on ways to reduce this. One example is there's something on my team called Night Court. If you, as an advocate of the platform, and see something that's perhaps should be fixed or isn't being done a right way, you can come in at 8 o'clock at night and go to Night Court, and you've got vice presidents and senior people there, and you can plead a case for fixing a certain feature or getting something noticed. And it's really nice and refreshing to see people really valuing the voice of the engineers that are in the trenches building this thing, instead of having the executives that are so far up making those decisions without valuing the input of the engineers. I also think it's very innovative how Microsoft is looking to their restructuring. You might have heard about that big reorg where Microsoft is now a big, huge devices and services company. So all of the, under the Windows organization, now you've got the people that are working on the OS for the Xbox. You've got people that are working on the OS for Windows Phone. You've got people that are working on the Windows OS. Whereas before that used to be separate business groups. They've now all been put on the same team so they can be more agile, innovative, and collaboration, which are big, important things at Microsoft. Microsoft is one of the most creative places that I've ever been. It feels like graduate school on steroids to me. I think it's fantastic. I don't have to be worried about going to do conferences or how many papers I published or something like that. I get to ship stuff, and I get to build things, and I love making developers cry. That's one of my favorite things. My manager, he's a former U.S. Special Forces staff sergeant. He went back to school after fighting in Panama and Afghanistan, and he comes in and he goes, make those developers cry. So I love it where I get to find bugs and stress systems, and the developer comes in the next day and they open up their TFS thing that tracks their bugs, and they might also have a little email and say, from me, that says, haha, I have some presents for you, and they check, and it might be 10 or 15 bugs overnight on something, because my system that I've automated sends me an email saying, here are the bugs, so I can just forward them on to that guy. So yeah, it's creative, it's fun. Finding your passion is the best thing to do at Microsoft. It's such a huge company that there's something for everyone. It's kind of like a rugby team. That's why I like playing rugby at university. There's a position for every single body type. You can probably guess what position I played. Maybe I'm a bit smaller than I was. My friends took one look at me and said, yeah, you're in the front row. And which was a bit of a difference. I always liked that one joke, what does a prop forward get on a math test? And the answer was drool. So it was kind of different for rugby humor. So let's see. I hear that the interview process for working at Microsoft is really hard. Can you share some thoughts on that? Well, I've got a whole slide deck on that, so I'm going to skip that question. And the last question that I have on here is, what kind of support did you get from Microsoft when you moved to live in Seattle? What about support after your move? So I'm Canadian, and where I did my PhD was out in the middle of nowhere on the east coast of Canada, a little place called Newfoundland, out in the Atlantic Ocean. 20 feet of snow per year, isolated island, and Microsoft gave me a job. So how do I get from Newfoundland to show up in Redmond for my first day of work? Microsoft helped me sell my house, pack my bags, find accommodation in Redmond, do all the legal visas, make my travel arrangements. Then once I got to Redmond, the legal team kept going. They're like, well, we don't want you and your family to have to worry about things while you're here, so we're going to help you get your green card. So a year ago, my wife, daughter, and I, we all got our green cards, and now we're permanent residents of the United States and don't have to worry about weird visa laws and things like that. So it's been really nice that Microsoft showed such a vested interest in me that they wanted to help me all through that. And I know that they do that for not only full-timers, but also for interns. If you get an internship at Microsoft, they will help you with your visas. They'll arrange and pay for your travel. They'll help you with accommodations. You can even opt to say, yes, I want you to take care of all my accommodations for me and just take a small bit out of my pay. It's great. They really take care of you. You're effectively a full-time employee when you're an intern at Microsoft, working on cool stuff, not, hey, go get Mark's coffee or something like that. You know, you're doing real problems, real things that are needed by the product teams. So with that, I'm going to flick over to the whiteboard here and see how I did with the questions that you asked ahead of time. So I think I've covered the innovation at Microsoft and why I chose Microsoft, because it was a fun alignment with what I was doing in my PhD. They got wind of my research, and it was a way of growing and expanding on the high-performance computing team. What is it like to work in Microsoft? Again, it's the graduate school on steroids. How do I stand out and differentiate myself? Well, that's up to you. It's your following your passions. Some examples, though. I mean, if I'm interviewing somebody or looking at a resume and I see an ACM programming team member, they've written that on their resume. To me, that's an awesome thing because of how you get pushed in terms of algorithms and programming and problem solving and thinking on your feet. But if you come along and say, I'm the president of CSE SOC, that's fantastic too. That's community outreach. Or you've contributed to an open source project, or you've done some kind of community service. It's all good. It's just how do you doing something to differentiate yourself is better than not doing anything to differentiate yourself. Growth at Microsoft. When you first take a position at Microsoft as a full-time employee, you're expected typically to be on that team for 18 months. After 18 months, the rest is up to you. You can go interview with any team you want. You can follow your passion. Friends might come to you and say, hey Mark, we've got this opportunity. I really liked working with you in the past. What do you think? Do you want to come over and work for our team? That's perfectly normal. So the growth, you're in the driver's seat. And having a good management chain, a good manager, they will help you with your growth. My manager, one of the first things he asks when I go into his office, he's like, hey, are you happy? Right, you have everything you need to do your job. Right? That's a pretty good manager. Those are the first two questions he asked me during our weekly meeting. And I've gone to him and said, well, I'd like to grow more in this area. Every half year I write a mid-year career discussion where I talk about my goals and my dreams and where I want to go to. And he helps you put together a learning plan, whether it's taking certain courses at Microsoft or doing a job shadow with somebody, or when projects come along and he knows that I'm interested in these things, he might cherry pick them and say, well, yeah, Mark wants that one, and we'll help him with that. So communication is really important, but Microsoft has a great program in place to help you with growth. So with that, I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions that do not relate to the interview or the technical interview process at Microsoft before I switch gears and start down that path. Yes?
Would you be able to shed any more light on your time as a researcher? I mean, it's not quite Microsoft, so you'd rather say it was there, I understand.
So, sure, what would you like to know?
Well, I don't know. Research sounds interesting and fun, and so I'm thinking about whether it's worth pursuing. And so I was just wondering what your thoughts are on what life is like as a researcher, and what sort of, I guess it would vary what it entails, but what sort of...
Yeah, I found, research was nice. It had that sort of creative thinking, but for me, I admittedly let Microsoft fall into some stereotypes. When I accepted the job at Microsoft, my friends from my research lab were coming along to me going, "Luke, I'm your father. Come to the dark side," and teasing me about that. I had no idea Microsoft was so creative and embraced research as much as it does until I got there. So if you can do research at Microsoft or find a team that's cutting edge and is innovating in things that you like to do, then fantastic. If you enjoy more of the research side of things, there's nothing wrong with that either. And in fact, my kind of pipe dream at the moment is, after another 15 years or so working at Microsoft, is to go back to academia and become a professor and teach at a university and do research. So there's nothing to say you can't combine the two. Some people get to work more closely with groups like Microsoft Research. There's startup teams within Microsoft, which is effectively doing research. How do you embrace a new technology, a new paradigm, a new business group, right? So there's lots of choices and lots of opportunities. The biggest thing is being true to yourself. I will say this though, work at Microsoft pays a whole heck of a lot better than it did as a research assistant or a lecturer or something like that. So, yeah. Yes?
This is also a little bit, this is just more because I'm curious. How does Microsoft deal with especially the Xbox One team and stuff, deal with the competitive environment that the gaming industry has? So you got the PlayStation 4, and they did that E3 conference that was kind of like, a middle finger to Microsoft in a way, some things they did. So how does the whole Microsoft regime kind of deal with that whole competitiveness and kind of, these guys are enemies and all this kind of stuff? How does that kind of work out in Microsoft?
Well, in some ways it's motivating. I mean, I'm not saying that Sony's my enemy, but I'm really passionate about what I work on, and I want to be proud of what I work on. I don't want to. When I was on the high performance computing team, my wife used to joke because she would say, "Oh, my husband works for Microsoft," and then they'd say, "What does he do?" "High performance computing," and then that's where the discussion would end. Now he works for Xbox. "Oh, Xbox." So I want that to continue. I want to be proud of what I work on. I don't want, "Oh, Xbox One, what a piece of junk." I don't want that to happen, and I'm going to do everything in my power not to let it happen. And it's not that I'm going to go target Sony or something like that. I'm going to be the best engineer that I can be. And that's pretty much the innovative attitude that Microsoft has in response to this. And I'm sure, I can't get into the details, but you've seen what's happened since E3 and the messaging and communications that has come out from Microsoft in terms of strategy, what they're doing with the Xbox One. And it's nice to see them taking people's concerns and feedback to heart instead of ignoring it and just plowing ahead because they think they're doing the right thing. It's actually nice to see executives coming in and talking to us as engineers and keeping us in the loop as to how things are going and really keeping that morale going. So that's about all I can say, but I hope that answers your question and gives a bit more insight. Yes?
What sort of position would a team at Microsoft intern go into?
I have an intern working for me this summer as a SDET intern. So she's just finished her third year at the University of Southern California, and she's come in and she's working with me. She owns her project is long-haul based user simulation testing for the Xbox One. So we've got stuff on the application platform, and we need to figure out how's that ecosystem in terms of stability, what's the experience like switching applications, switching between games, all that kind of stuff. and she's building an automated testing system to test that. So it's a real-life project, something that's really important to the business that she's working on, and we're giving her the right mentorship and coaching and the tools available to do that. So she's a full-fledged member of the engineering team. So there's interns that come in as SDETs, SDEs, that's software development engineers. Program managers will have interns. There's also hardware engineers that are interns. But from what Lauri tells me, there are certain visa restrictions and problems with getting visas for people from Australia and New Zealand that the PM interns and the hardware interns are just not possible. So for the positions we're here today, and for the foreseeable future
once you have your foot in the door, though, it's easier to get a transfer within, and you can get a transfer visa. So if your dream is to be a hardware engineer, but you're also a great computer scientist, like get your foot in the door as a software development engineer, and then it's easier to transfer with that visa rather than getting a new one. So if you want to be a PM, we're not offering that right now. Start as an SDET and then do a great job, and we can help facilitate that with the visa process. But getting in, because of the demand, SDE and SDET are really only what we're available to do right now. Hopefully hardware coming soon, but not yet.
Yes, you had a question.
Further to the immigration issues, what if you're a Canadian citizen? Would that change the options available to you if you're applying to Australia?
No. Yeah, you still have H-1B, you still have all that to deal with, yeah. So I know some people probably came for resume tips too, so I want to make sure we sleep time for
Okay,
that.
so I'll take 2 more questions and then we'll flip to resume tips. Okay, you had a question in the back?
How long usually does it take for a new SDE to get up to speed? And what sort of training or do you provide for new SDEs for the first 3 months?
Oh, so you have, you're normally paired up with a buddy who's a senior engineer or something to help you learn the Microsoft culture and the ropes, and you'll get a mentor to help you. There's all kinds of Microsoft courses. There's like a mini university at Microsoft that you might be taking courses on new SDETs, new SDEs, programming standards, design patterns. It's really an open book. You'll work with your manager to figure out what's appropriate for you to be taking. So you'll come up with a learning plan, and your manager will assign various training to you. So how long does it take? It's not like all of a sudden you flick a switch and you are productive. You start to have more good days than bad days, right? When you're starting up, there's some days where you're like, oh man, I spun my wheels all day and did nothing. I got stuck on this thing. So you learn to ask for help, and you find ways of asking for help that you don't become a pest or bothersome. So I would say within 6 weeks, you're having more good days than bad days. Last question, yes?
With all the skills and expertise you have, why haven't you decided to go entrepreneurial or something like that, like do your own startup? Like why did you decide to pledge your allegiance to
Well, I did the startup thing when I was younger, and went through a couple startups, and it wasn't great. I mean, at Microsoft, I feel like I can be in a startup environment, but at the same time, I can feed my family and keep the trains running on time, right? Yeah. So it's nice to have that balance where I'm working on new, innovative stuff, but I don't have those same risks where I'm worrying where my next paycheck is going to come from. Sure. If I didn't have a family, it might be a different story, or if I won the lottery, and maybe I could go make my own business, but right now, this is the kind of solution that works best for me. Okay, so I'm going to switch decks.